What is up, Who Dat Nation? Chris Vogel and John Hendricks here of Boot Crew Media. Another Saints pregame preview. Saints Steelers. This game looks a little bit different now than it looked back then, but still important nonetheless with the way the NFC South is shaping up. John, this was, a lot of weeks we've dealt with long injury reports. This week felt like the one that was just kept going on and on, almost like a CVS receipt. You look at that going on. What's kind of the status of this team going into this Steelers game?
Yeah, look, I think let's start with the positive. Jarvis Landry set to return. I talked about it yesterday. I don't expect him to get like a full workload, but we'll see. I mean, it was one of those things where I think they have a habit of bringing these injured players back and just kind of put them on to some type of pitch count, maybe 10 to 15 snaps for Jarvis, depending how that ankle does feel. But, the big concerns are the defensive line, the offensive line, and, who's playing in linebackers just a lot and in the back half. So there's more than one that you have to deal with. So let's start with the secondary. Marcus May, it's an abdomen injury, but then you have PJ Williams that's popped up with a illness. Marcus May's been in the locker room, so he's been around. He just hasn't been at practice. That doesn't seem optimistic there. Williams, him and Tano Passignon got the illness and such, but today will be a really important day for him. I would trend to think that they would probably end up making the trip and trying to play, but it's just one of those that you got to see how things unfold. On the defensive side, the defensive line, obviously Marcus Davenport had a calf injury. He kind of gave us the thumbs up yesterday in the locker room, so I think that's a good indication that he'll play. So the big one is Pete Werner. That one is one that you're not going to see him. He was in a boot, and he's also using a walking scooter. That's a more serious injury that he's having to deal with. Probably going to miss some time for sure. We'll see if he lands on IR, but that's never a good sign for somebody like him. And then offensively, you're going to miss Eric McCoy for sure. He's also in a walking boot. He's got a calf issue. But, again, we saw him around the locker room. We'll see how that kind of plays out. I don't think it's as significant, but, again, he limped off the field. Tough one to watch for sure. And then Andres Pete's out with the triceps injury. So, say all that to say, offensive line is going to look a little bit different. I think we're assuming that Cesar Ruiz is going to play at center, but from what I'm hearing, that it could be that they may look to have Lewis Kidd and Calvin Throckmorton rotate at left guard, maybe keep Cesar at right guard, and then maybe elevate Josh Andrews to play center. He's a veteran in this league, could potentially do, but we'll have to kind of see because they are practicing or they are doing kind of like the walkthroughs and stuff today. They'll leave at 3:00 on Saturday afternoon around that time frame. So lot to unpack, but this team just can't stay healthy, and it's just been freaky nature when it comes to the injury front.
So I want to start with the offensive line situation because I think one of the more telling parts of Monday's game against the Ravens was just up front. I think the Ravens, in terms of physicality and winning in the trenches, that's something that they did on most snaps. You take out Eric McCoy, you take out Andres Pete, who, again, that's 2/3 of the interior of your offensive line. I mean, how do you find a way to kind of combat that? Like, look, I know you've more than most people have been very high on Lewis Kidd, but again, undrafted rookie, this is a big jump to get into this game. You look at Calvin Throckmorton, he has experience, but again, you much prefer having Pete at left guard than Throckmorton. Do you feel like this is one of those situations out of all the injury aspects right now? I know they're banged up in the secondary. I know you mentioned, Davenport banged up, but should play, which is great news. Between the secondary, the linebacker group, the offensive line, which one kind of scares you the most in terms of, man, I know next man up is a thing in the NFL, but sometimes too many injuries, too many injuries.
Yeah, I think I'm most concerned about the linebacker spot. And, I know Caden Ellis is going to go there, and obviously the way they run two linebackers on the field, is he Pete Werner? No, but is he up to the challenge? Yes, he's getting some work at will. You're also going to see some Zach Bond in there too. And the thing is, it's Kenny Pickett and Fryermuth, the tight end. He's very talented, and George Pickens, obviously, too. Those are two of the big ones that you want to watch out for. And look, I know this is the Steelers' offense hasn't been that great, and especially you got Najee Harris running in the backfield too. But that's the biggest thing I'm concerned about is Harris beating you underneath, and a guy like Warner, his speed is missed, and then obviously his tackling. I mean, he's been a big force. The back end, look, I just don't know if Kenny Pickett is gonna have a lot of opportunities to chuck it down the field and such. So, if it's Williams, I feel good about it. If not, maybe it's Justin Evans. Maybe they get a little creative, and it's really going to be interesting because they're only allowed to elevate two guys from the practice squad. So maybe one of those is Bryce Thompson. Maybe they feel like they want to roll in JT Gray at some point. But, those guys are not, Marcus May. They're not, the guys that you want necessarily saying starting role, but May's been a little bit disappointing this year, I feel like, too. And so I think that's something to really just keep an eye on. But I think given the opponent, it's not as detrimental as if you were playing a team like the 49ers who have weapons all over the place, right? Or the Rams with Cooper Kupp. So I feel decent about it, but the linebacker position is what concerns me the most, just because of Harris, Fryermuth, and all that other underneath success that the Steelers could have and pose a problem with the Saints defense, who really needs to search for answers. I mean, the whole team does.
Yeah, and you talked about Kenny Pickett. Something interesting that I saw with Pickett, only one game this year he has where he didn't throw at least one interception. He's played in 5 games. He has 8 interceptions thrown. And that makes sense. Rookie quarterback, kind of learning through things. Turnovers are going to happen. I know, they're missing guys on defense. We've talked about that. But even then, is it too harsh to say, like, this has to be a game where the Saints force at least a turnover or two? Because I looked at, the interception numbers, 2 interceptions as a team this year, both from Tyrann Mathieu, 18 all of last year. And just to kind of, and not to throw salt to the moon, but just to put in perspective the lack of turnovers, Gardner Johnson in Philly right now has more interceptions than the whole team. And the same for Marcus Williams, who's been out for over a month now with a wrist injury. Like, is it too, like, unfair of a statement? Be like, man, this has to be a week where at least 1 interception, maybe even 2, because you're banged up. You're going to need to steal a possession or 2. And look, the weather could play a factor in this one, and you're going up against a rookie quarterback.
Yeah, a turnover or 2, I think, is the kind of like turnover or bust type scenario. And look, I feel like they could still win and not get a turnover. But again, you're facing an opponent who has been making mistakes, right? And the Saints have also been making mistakes. And this is going to come down to who makes less mistakes to win this game, right? And so I feel like, this defense is searching for answers. And this is a very tense week, not from a locker room perspective, but just an important week because, the Saints are in this thing. I get it. I understand. But, how many more weeks can you keep saying, yeah, we feel good about the locker room and our chances in the division and stuff, and it's still not leading to win? So the defense does have to step up. You have an opponent that you can get after the quarterback. You can get some turnovers. If you don't, I don't want to say it's a colossal failure, but it's just a huge missed opportunity for the Saints defense. And look, on the other side, offensively, you got to get some things going. We know TJ Watt's going to be back in the mix and such. Possibly pitch count is what we've heard. But, regardless, the defense, they always talk about put it on me, do all these things. This is the week where you have to have that happen. And if they can't get turnovers against Pittsburgh, I don't understand how you're going to think that, hey, we're an ascending team going to the playoffs and trying to make a run at the division, and such. But, that you have to find a way because the turnovers are just not there, and they've got to find a way. And there's really no other way to slice it.
So you mentioned TJ Watt. That's something that I think factors into this game. Rod Walker actually put out one of the crazier stats I've seen in week 1 when TJ Watt was on the field, 5 turnovers forced by Pittsburgh's defense. They only have 5 without him for the whole time that he's missed. So just to put into perspective and to kind of look at Monday night's game, Justin Houston, I thought, looked incredible for the Ravens, multiple sacks, had an interception. Now you go up against a guy in TJ Watt, who, again, we'll see where he's at with the pectoral injury, but this is a player who, when healthy, can be a game wrecker. You mentioned you got to start winning games because, it's great to say the NFC South is still up for grabs, and it is, especially after the Falcons lost to the Panthers. What point, though, do the Saints kind of look at this QB situation? Because I've actually said the Seattle game, the Cincy game, the Raiders game, I think Andy Dalton did exactly what Andy Dalton was supposed to do. But 2 out of the last 3 games we have seen where it's like, if they get behind, this isn't the offense that's going to throw their way back into games. Do you feel like this is such an important game in terms of the scope of it, where it's like, hey, if the Saints lose and it's in a fashion where they just don't have that firepower offensively, maybe something changes? Or do you feel like that's too premature?
I think something could change because you got to have answers somewhere. And, it's interesting because, look, New Orleans Football's Mike Tripa put out an excellent story. He caught up with Jameis yesterday, was watching him talk to him and stuff. And, that was kind of exclusive for him and stuff and just more to it. And look, even when Allen said that Jameis was healthy, I mean, I told you on this, I don't know how many weeks ago, he's not 100%. And I've said that plenty of times. So he might be healthy enough to go into a game, but he's definitely not 100%. And so, if they can't win and they lose this game against Pittsburgh in a game they should win, I mean, that's the thing is they should win. They should beat this team. They should get us into, a spot where I say, okay, maybe we see some big turnarounds from the Baltimore game, but, offensive struggles, it wasn't just one phase. The running game looked like crap. The penalties were an issue. The play calls were suspect. The usage on some players are just not there. And so, I mean, there's a lot of guilty hands. It's not just Andy Dalton. It's on Pete Carmichael, too. They got to find some ways to move the football and be more efficient on third down. And on the opposite side, get off the field on third down. So you can't be in for 12, 13 plays and expect for this thing to work and then run a 3 and out. That's just a recipe for disaster. And that's why we so much or talk so much about this team needing to be in sync on all facets of the game. This is the reason why. And again, I know it seems like that's the norm in the NFL. You want to have that, but the Saints just have not been able to figure that out for whatever reason this season. And so, look, Dalton's got some pressure on him. I feel like tomorrow he's going to get, a big weapon in Landry. And again, like I said, I don't think it's going to be huge as far as how many reps he sees, but again, getting Jarvis involved, even getting him a few targets or looks in the red zone is going to go a long way for this team and this offense. And then you got to get Alvin Kamara going, and it's real tough because you're facing the 3-4. They hadn't played a 3-4 defense since training camp when they did joint practices with the Packers. So, it creates an interesting dynamic when you got Devin Bush in the middle and such. And so, and there's obviously more there, but, this is going to be a test for the Saints offense. They have to get things going. And the thing is, they have to get it going early. And Pete Carmichael talked about it the other day. He said, because he's been asked a lot about the Taysom Hill, why are you not using him and stuff? He said specifically, got to get him going earlier. And so we'll see if that actually happens. But, again, there's some certain play calls, that Taysom can do things with the ball, whether it's throwing or running or such. So you got to get some of those things in those looks early, because I think this is the best thing. That would be the best scenario for this team. Get up early, try to get some lead, get some confidence in, and then let your defense kind of handle some things and just take care of the advantages or take care of any type of miscues that they may have. That's their best friend for tomorrow, because if they do a back and forth slugfest, I don't feel like they're going to win.
Okay, so I know that they are banged up. We've talked about it, and look, this team right now, they're not where they're supposed to be. At what point? And I know it's so tough because look, this division, who knows? The Buccaneers lose on Sunday, it's still open even if they do lose another game. But at what point do we almost have that conversation where it's like, if it doesn't get turned around soon, maybe it doesn't get turned around at all this year? Like, when does that start to creep in? Because unfortunately, the two of us for the last couple of weeks have talked about, like, look, this is a good opportunity, and it has been. Like, they've been in a lot of these games. They just have these moments where it just slips away. At what point do we start to be like, all right, it's just not going to materialize this year?
Yeah, I think this is the week that you got to see them win. And if they can't win this week, or if they win this week and they lose against the Rams, then I think your chances kind of run down a lot even more, which is because the Rams are a hobbled team too. I mean, again, these games are winnable, right? I think even San Francisco, they might be the team that you're like, okay, I can understand if they win their next two and win against Pittsburgh, win against the Rams at home, and then lose to the 49ers. I get that. I think that's probably realistic, but also San Francisco's had some opportunities too. And so I just don't know, when you look across the schedule on paper, you could say, okay, well, this is supposed to be kind of like the tough part, but now it's not as tough. Philly's really the only team that is going to probably wreck you unless they're saying, okay, we got our first round bye locked up and we're going to rest some starters or some craziness like that. But, I think this is important, because if they lose another one, they sink to 3-7. Are they going to win 7 straight to get to 10-7? No. Or can they win? You're down to only so many strikes, and you're asking them to pull off kind of the impossible. Not saying they can't, but now you're suddenly thinking that your margin for error, you can only lose maybe one more game or maybe 2 at most, just depending on how the NFC South is going to shape up. And you guys know as well as I do that this is a team that really doesn't get done any favors. So the biggest thing is they have to take care of things themselves. And I think that the deck is stacked a little bit right now with everything and the challenges and stuff. And look, I don't expect anything as far as a coaching move anytime soon, anything in the in season. But, if they can't put this thing together, then you might try to reassess. I think DA gets the benefit of the doubt this year and tries again. But if something goes to the wayside, I could see coordinators and stuff or position coaches falling first. But, you're starting to go down that road if you can't put together a win here and maybe a win against Los Angeles. And if you lose today, I just don't know how much of the belief in the locker room stays, because I think this is a team that knows they're talented, can't figure out for whatever reason. And there's so many times you can say, well, we still believe in these guys and we still feel like we can pull this thing out. I mean, when your record says what you are what you are when it comes to your record. There is no feel good about that.
Yeah, and last thing, John, before we wrap this up, I would imagine it's leaning one way, but for you, you look at this game, do you put this one on like, okay, the offense has to be the unit that really takes kind of the shoulder of the load this week?
Yeah, I think so, and it's a tough challenge, but they're going to have to. They're going to have to figure this out, even with the offensive line being hopple. I mean, you can't lean on excuses anymore, and the defense has got to get up and they have to play up. I think it falls on both of them. Maybe for the offense, just because of how bad they looked against Baltimore, and it wasn't just inefficiencies. I mean, they were letting unblocked guys come and get free rushes. You know what I mean? You can't do that. You can't have those breakdowns and such. And when it comes down to it, you can't put a touchdown up until late in the fourth quarter in garbage time, and your offense has been like that. There's a lot of, again, hands to be dirty in there, and so I think the offense has got a lot of pressure on them right now. They've got to deliver, but at the same breath, I think the defense has to deliver too, and they have to figure out who they are, because look, it wasn't Lamar Jackson passing that really killed them. Lamar had less than 200 yards passing, and their leading receiver had 24 yards of, and that was Isaiah Likely on a touchdown pass. The breakdowns just can't happen and such. So, I think both of them feel the weight of the pressure. But look, this offense is, again, talented. I know they got patchwork they have to do, but the usage and the players, they should be able to get in the end zone. They should have to make this thing happen. And I feel like the pressure's on them a good bit, just as much as the defense.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see how this game starts early. John mentioned it about maybe getting the offense on track. And it's also worth noting, Saints coming off a short week, Steelers coming off a bye. I think that first quarter, seeing where the energy's at, will be very interesting. But that's going to do it for us here for Boot Crew Media's pregame show. Saints, Steelers, 12 p.m. Central. Should be a fun one. They need a win. We'll see if they go out and get it.